Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me the honor to be here. Thank you to Selina for being a gracious host. I just wanted a simple lunch just now, like Penang, Singapore laksa. but thank you for the great meal. Johan for organizing everything, for linking us up. Nawab for fantastic commentary on teaching me about Salafi religion, Islamic version. Okay, I'll just get straight to the point. There's a lot of topics to cover, and I will just dispense with the protocol issue and just get down to business. Now, this is a speech in 3 parts. Okay, part 1 is on the state of the Malaysian first quarter 2017. What are the fiscal challenges ahead? And a quick mention on the Saudi and Aramco deal, Saudi Aramco and China investment deals. This will lead to part 2, which is on general GE14, the coming GE14. What are the chances? I'm going to give the spoiler away now. We have a 50-50 chance of winning. So we're quite confident. Which then leads on to part 3 nicely, where I will talk about what if Pakatan wins, since we have a 50-50 chance. What will we be doing in terms of policies and timing? Okay? As I said earlier to the early crowd, I'm going to try and keep this more open-ended, more on questions. So I'll try to touch as much topic as possible, and I expect you all to volley back some questions to me later. Yeah, let's start with part 1. What is the state of the Malaysian economy in first quarter 2017? We just got the new Bank Negara numbers out just a week ago. We're seeing encouraging GDP growth of about 5.6% in the first quarter. So that's really good. Yeah, 5.6%. Consumer consumption is up about 6.6%. Government spending is 7.5%. Ringgit has more or less stabilized, it's not dropping anymore, but hasn't really improved at all. Exports are up 9.8%, and the big one is the capital expenditure imports is about 12.9%. We have a bit of inflation issues with about 4.3% CPI. Yeah. Now, all this data you can get on Bank Negara. Essentially, they all point towards a so-called picture of a recovering economy. Yeah. Now, if this momentum carries through in the second and third quarter, we believe that, as most economists will tell you, it will take about 6 months to a year before it actually hits the street, the common people. Yeah, these big headline numbers will actually impact the common people about 6 months to a year. Najib will be in a good position to call an election in September. Yeah, so if the first quarter numbers are so rosy, he should be considering calling an election in September. And in fact, there's a small window for an election in September. But my bet is I think it will be next year in March. Okay? But despite all these numbers, there are alternative explanations for these rosy numbers. The first one is that I've spoken to a lot of economists in town in KL and also bankers. I think there's a general consensus that the strong growth in terms of capital expenditure is not really reflective of actual business confidence in KL. Yeah? So you got all this growth, they're spending 12.9% increase, but it's not really an issue about confidence or business confidence. It's actually an actualization of spending that has been put off in about the last 1 or 2 years when the ringgit was very volatile. Yeah. So for instance, if say you are a manufacturer of wood, rubber wood, right? And you wanted to buy a machine from Finland, okay? The last 2 years, you just wait lah. The ringgit is going here and there. It's all very volatile. So I think after these 2 years of waiting, they finally decided to spend it in this quarter. That is why you'll see suddenly an uptake in the capital expenditure of most companies. Okay. As for consumer consumption, this spike, which is quite reasonable, at 6%, is due largely to the fact that people have resigned to the fact they have to pay GST. Yeah. So I think this is the 2-year period after GST. People sort of, okay lah, let's just spend it lah. We have to pay anyway. We can't get away from this. So I think the spike is to do with GST normalizing. Yeah. And also there was considerable consumer rumors in the first quarter of 2017. My mother actually called me and said, hey, you better buy now. The price is going to increase next time. So I had to go and buy my new washing machine. So as for government spending, a higher government spending is a no-brainer because it's an election year or possible election year. So government will spend more, right? So we look at all the big macro numbers, the headliners, and then there are explanations why these headlines are not really truly reflective of the economic sentiment on the ground, on the street. As I said earlier, it takes 6 months to a year to filter down, but I think from my qualitative experiment in my own little constituency, right, I can tell you what the feeling and the mood on the ground is. In my area, it is clear that there's still a very high level of negativity and anxiety, economically speaking. Yeah, I think there's a general feeling everybody feels poorer than last year, and the last year was a bad year. Okay, in my office, which is a simple office on a shop lot, I have a mechanic next door. He's doing really badly, you know. So he tells me he's got like maybe one client a day. That's not good. Okay, and then we got like 3 mamak shop on my shop lot. One of them closed down, and the other 2 lost 30% business. So I mean, it's quite serious. The pharmacy that is there, the local pharmacy that serves my little area, section 14, the pharmacy changed hands twice in 2 years. You know, it's just they can't do business, they go and sell out. And this is in the backdrop of a new MRT station opening up. Yeah, a lot of the people, local people expected, wow, this is going to be a boom time for us. It hasn't materialized. In fact, I would say that last month, I thought Chinese New Year was bad, but last month was probably quite low, the feeling on the ground. Okay, we know generally like housing is not doing well at all. Housing sales are low. Car sales are low except for luxury cars. That's Malaysia for you. Only rich people make more money during economic times are difficult. And also there's a general feeling that everybody knows somebody who is an Uber part-time driver. Right? It's crazy. The guy who drove me to the office one day, my car had to send for repair, told me very clearly that he was a property agent, been working for 7 years, 1 sale a month. He has no choice but to drive Uber for 6 hours a day. Yeah? So that's why I think the economic sentiment and the economic headline numbers for first quarter, there is a world apart. Yeah? Again, we don't know when this trickle will come down. It could be 6 months, which means September, or it could be December. Yeah? Now, why do I start with talking about economic sentiment? This talk really focuses on whether we can win general election and whether we can progress into what kind of policies if the Pakatan government wins. Okay? We talk about economic sentiment because 30 to 35% of Malaysian voters are pure economic voters. They don't know, for instance, they don't know which party Wong Chen is from. They have no idea. They don't care about 1MDB. They can't be bothered to learn about the intricacy of 1MDB. Yeah? Some of them believe that Abdullah Badawi is still the Prime Minister. Now, these are your 30-35% voter base. Yeah? These are the same people that half of them will turn up to vote, the other half will tidur during the election. Yeah? So therefore, we know they're sensitive to a few matters. One is food prices, wages, jobs, and affordability of housing. I mean, these are the core issues. That's why it's important to understand first quarter results in order to predict what will happen if an election is called in September. Yeah? So what we know is this. The government's economic numbers look good, but I don't think it's trickling down. So what then can the government do to ensure that, the Barisan Nasional government do, to ensure that they're ready for election? They have to essentially pump prime the economy. That is it. Before an election, every government will pour in billions and get it done. Yeah? The problem is the government has no fiscal ability to pump prime anymore because its revenue stream is extremely tight and their ability to raise bonds is extremely limited as well. The government has some sort of cash flow problem. Yeah? While they may not admit it, and we know that every month the tax deduction comes in, yeah, they have a cash flow problem because I know contractors of major government projects are not being paid for 6 months. They have a cash flow problem because most ministries are cutting their expenses by 8 to 10%. Yeah? On the one hand, they have a cash flow income from GST, which is about 40 billion a year. But the unintended consequence of GST is that it has sucked out 40 billion from the economy. The GST implementation in Malaysia is completely flawed by one issue. When you introduce a new tax like GST, you're supposed to be tax neutral. You're supposed to give a correlation of 40 billion drop in income tax. Yeah? So that the public do not feel the tax coming in. Yeah? But in Malaysian terms, the 6% GST was an additional tax. There was no significant drop in any income tax or corporate tax. Therefore, it sucked out 40 billion from the market. And that is why the economy has been sluggish since the GST was introduced. Okay? Now, on top of this, we have very high levels of corporate unhappiness, I used to be a corporate lawyer, so I deal with corporations and I talk to them. I've got friends in there. They don't support me, yeah, because we're in the opposition, but they still talk to me lah. And occasionally they buy me lunch. Yeah. So there is a very aggressive tax collection efforts going on. Some of you may have received, if you're Malaysian, received this long story from Lee Kim Yew about how he was unfairly treated by the tax office. Yeah, Lee Kim Yew is a big tycoon in KL. Yeah, all the tycoons apparently is being targeted. Those who are linked with Mahathir had to complain that his friends and family are being attacked by income tax. It is partly true, but the target for income tax collection is actually nationwide. We are seeing doctors being charged, specialists. Yeah, the entire the doctor community had to pay about $1 billion in back taxes. They claw back 3 years. Yeah, so I think the tax collection urgency and frequency and also the enthusiasm to collect tax is a clear sign that the government's revenue stream is quite limited and under pressure. So therefore, if they cannot raise it internally through the tax system, where are they going to raise the money? Normally, every year, the government goes into a deficit of 50 billion, 40 to 50 billion, and normally this 40 and 50 billion is paid through bonds, government-issued bonds. Yeah? This year, they cannot do it anymore. I think they have a problem. While rating agencies are kind to them and gives them an A- rating, in actual fact, if they try to sell to the foreigners are not buying. In fact, the foreign holdings in bonds used to be about 35%. That has dropped in 6 months to 25%. That means the foreigners are still selling down Malaysian bonds. And when they sell down, EPF or the Malaysian version of CPF absorbs them. But there's only so much the Malaysian GLCs or GLICs can take. Yeah. So therefore, pumping the economy through better cash flow from revenue is not possible. And pumping the economy through raising bonds is also not possible. Which then raises the issue that Najib is now eyeing foreign entities to help pump the Malaysian economy up leading to the general election. Okay? So you got good economic data coming in, but the street doesn't feel it. The government needs to spend money to win election, but they can't raise it internally through cash flow, nor can they raise it through bonds. So now they turn to China and they turn to Saudi Arabia. Now, before we start on China, let's just talk about Saudi Arabia. Okay? Saudi Arabia, the king came to Malaysia, signed some MOU. Now, that is to do with the Aramco listing. You have to understand that it is not free money, not another 2.6 billion to Najib. This is not the case. This is a serious investment, so to speak. Yeah, they are supposed to invest in Rapid. But it is conditional on the Aramco listing. That is the key point you got to take away from this. Yeah, Aramco is trying to list itself and raise, I think, close to 2 trillion, which is what the Saudis think their worth is. Other rating agencies think, or banks think that it's only worth 400 billion. So by signing a Rapid deal and signing a deal in Indonesia, they're trying to create an image that this company has strong uptake if they go for listing. Yeah. So you must understand the context of this Aramco deal. It is conditional on the listing of Aramco. Okay. So what it means that the Saudi promise to come in is not going to materialize in time for the general election. So you can basically say goodbye to the Saudi thing as a factor to pump the Malaysian economy up leading to the general election. Now, on the side note, I think I had a good chance to talk to Nawab and also Selina and Aida, is it? Right? On the issue of, terrorism or Islamic issues, right? I myself, I'm really skeptical of the Saudi investments in Malaysia. First thing is, of course, we know Saudi had to implement GST late last year. Now, this is an oil-producing country having to implement GST. So it tells you clearly that they are in financial trouble. This is not the same Saudi in the 70s where the playboys can just throw money left and right and buy palaces when they go on holiday. Those days are gone. So Saudi now has to make sure that any investments they do actually bring real results. Second, we know I'm saying we're skeptical and we're against in some ways. Skeptical, we think they don't have money. Against is basically because of the 2.6 billion. It's a political problem for us to openly encourage Saudi Arabia, and also it's linked to the Yemeni war, which the United Nations deems to be illegal. Yeah, Malaysia's participation in there seems to have a trade-off of some sort to do with the 1MDB scandal. The third issue is, of course, and I was explained by Nawab just now what Salafi really is about. But we know that with the increased presence of Saudi investment, that will result, whether directly or indirectly, in increased religious influences in the Salafi and Wahhabi sector for Malaysia. And that could be problematic for Singapore. Yeah. Now the fourth one, I think, as a basic lah, yeah, Saudi Arabia would have called their cousins at Abu Dhabi before they make an investment in Malaysia and say, hey, look, can we do a deal with Najib and 1MDB? The answer would be, don't do it. So I think there's going to be a trust deficit. Despite the happy pictures and the MOU sign, I think the Saudis and everybody else in the world is worried about doing any deals with Najib. Okay? Now let's move to the China issue. I think most of you, I hope later, will ask more questions on China if you're interested. But I'm not going to talk too long because this will take a day to talk about China, right? So I'll just simplify it by just pointing out to you what is the Malaysian perspective or the Najib administration's perspective on the issue. First, I think we have to say that in 2015 to 2016, the Najib administration, a bit like Singapore, has a nuanced double-dipping strategy, basically to engage Obama on the one hand, and at the same time also engage the Chinese. Yeah, and you must know that the history of the Najib administration in its ties with Obama in particular. I think from the very start, the moment he became prime minister, Najib invested heavily to build a personal relationship with Obama. That is why Malaysia, despite the many criticisms within UMNO, went ahead and signed the TPP. So we know that these two golfing buddies are really close. Yeah. Now the problem with this relationship, of course, the FBI or the Department of Justice started the whole kleptocracy thing, and you guys are in the middle of everything here. That has sort of soured the relationship, as Obama personally is very close to Najib but cannot be seen with him. So this situation actually pushed Najib closer to China. Okay, Najib needed China to immediately get Chinese money to bail out 1MDB. This is 2015. Okay, so China quickly came in and bought the 1MDB power plants, the EDRA deal, and then signed the TRX deal, which is what I'm going to talk about next. As you all read in the last 2 weeks, it's the big story. Yeah. So overnight, from being pro-Obama, Najib switched camp and said that China is their best go-to friend at the moment. Yeah. So in 2016, then we have all these announcements about high-speed rail, which is what involves Singapore. We got the East Coast Rail Link, and then you throw in a few more ports for good measure. Okay. The Najib strategy so started as looking at China as someone to save 1MDB financially, then became a geopolitical engagement with China, a full-blown engagement with China to be part of the OBOR or One Belt, One Road system. Okay. Now, the overall strategy remained the same until recently the TRX deal sort of showed that we have another problem, that everything is not hunky-dory, it's not so straightforward. Yeah. It also signals the end of a honeymoon period between Najib and China, and that a frostier future may emerge. Okay. And this situation is not because Najib one day woke up and said, I don't like the Chinese. This situation actually emerges from one key issue, and that is the 1MDB problem has basically been exported to the Ministry of Finance of Malaysia. In the IPIC 1MDB settlement, Ministry of Finance essentially took on all the debts of 1MDB. Therefore, Najib is no longer under stress, financial stress, to resolve 1MDB. Yeah? Ministry of Finance takes over the problem. Najib is no longer any financial stress regarding 1MDB. He can now pick and choose. And in the TRX deal, it is a pure commercial reason. The TRX was sold to Chinese when Najib was so desperate at $560, $570 per square feet, ringgit. Yeah? Today's value is close to 2,000, almost 4 times, 3 to 4 times in value. So when they're in a better position, Najib being a transactional leader, Najib and Rosma are really famous for transactions. Yeah, they look at it and say, look, this is an opportunity to get as much money for the government and also to enrich their friend Desmond Lim, which is why they cancelled the TRX deal. Yeah, and then asked Desmond to go and talk to Dalian Wanda, to try and close the matter. Yeah, but of course everything backfired, as you know. The IWC group and CREC may come back to take the terminal. They may take another portion, we don't know yet. But there is no rush anymore for the government to close the TRX deal. Yeah. The question then is, this cancellation, there's a lot of talk that the Chinese leadership is very upset with Najib. Yeah. So we don't really know how far-reaching is this issue. Losing face is important, or face is important for the Chinese. Okay. Now let's turn to the Chinese point of view. It's very simple. Earlier I explained to some people about the geopolitical situation of China, but in terms of pure economics, China is very simple. They want to make sure that the OBOR continues. Yeah? So they are going to approve every deal regarding infrastructure. That means ports. It also means the railways. Okay? If there are ports and railways, okay, go ahead. But I think China's governance is different from last year or different from 2 years ago. China's governance have increased. These projects still need to make economic sense. Yeah? There is always a danger if you pursue a big project, 50 billion, 100 billion, and they don't make economic sense, that this could come back and bite President Xi himself. Why did you make such a rash decision? I think China's economic situation is not as rosy as it was 5 years ago. It is arguably precarious. Everybody talks about the big China crash is coming. So I think there is a shift in Chinese government perspective that any deal, even its OBOR deals, must still make financial sense. The other point is this. China's investment in Africa, in Pakistan and all these countries, right? All these third world countries that they try to build their influence, is that if they can't pay for a project, they will seize their land and seize their hydrocarbon, take their oil and gas, get payment in kind. Yeah? They can't do that in Malaysia. They can't say if they put in 50 billion for ECRL, and ECRL says that doesn't make financial sense, yeah, cannot pay back. Chinese government can't say, I'm going to take 200,000 acres of land. Because in Malaysia, the federal government doesn't control state land. That's very clear. Yeah? And China is in no position to squeeze Petronas. Petronas is a big company. They can't say, give me 300,000 barrels of oil every year to repay back for this debt. Yeah? So I think the Chinese are worried that if they pursue a non-feasible project, that it could be a problem for them. Okay? Now, for the OBOR, they're clear. If this helps China geopolitically, we must pursue, but make sure it is feasible. As for the private companies, we learned that Geely got the deal yesterday, yeah, with Proton. For the private companies, if you're doing property, no. Because property is basically the conduit to take out capital from China. Yeah? As you all know, they've invested heavily in Forest City. Forest City is how Chinese are taking out money and putting in Singapore and putting in Malaysian banks by buying the property there, paying the money in Beijing, and collecting the property down here. Yeah? So the Chinese government got onto the game, I think a few years ago. Now they've decided to stop capital flight because there could be potential of some crash in China. Yeah? So basically, TRX land deal, I think it's more or less dead lah. Yeah? Other for the terminal portion, yeah, where the high-speed train is going to be, all the others are dead. But all the other infrastructure projects will continue. Okay? Now, so, as I said earlier, he needs to pump the economy in order to win the election. He can't raise it through their own cash flow. They can't raise it through their own bonds. And it looks like China and Saudi Arabia may not be able to deliver on time for them for this election. Therefore, it brings up to my part 2, which is basically, can we win this general election? Yeah? Now, what other deciding factors other than economics? Economics is the prime factor. 30 to 35% of the population are economic voters. Yeah, but what other issues are there? There is, of course, the issue of pass and the three-corner fight scenario. Yeah, the basic math is such. In 2013, UMNO won on 55% Malay support. For the purposes of analyzing anything in Malaysia, you just have to look at Malay voters. You really don't have to worry about the Chinese or the or the Indian votes. It doesn't matter. At 55% Malay support, UMNO will retain government. In 2017, UMNO support level has gone down to about 45. They've lost 10% drop. Yeah? So they should theoretically lose. But with PAS having about 25 to 30% support level, yeah, and opening up a three-corner fight with the opposition, UMNO can still scrape through at 45%, comfortably, not scrape through, comfortably win at 45%. Yeah? So this is how they talk about why there is no chance for the opposition to win. So there is actually an oversimplification of the situation. Yeah? There are fundamental flaws to that simplistic equation and argument. The first fundamental flaw is that support level and turnout level and what we call transferable vote level is only looking at 65 to 70% of the voting population. That 30-35 are economic voters. They are not subjected to this structuring or political maneuvering. Yeah. So therefore, whatever we analyze, we still have to worry about that 30-35%. Second, coalition politics always talks about, voter turnout, yeah, and voter support level. But for the first time in Malaysia, because of Amanah, yeah, taking away PAS votes, because Bersatu taking away UMNO votes, because of PAS taking away the entire opposition vote, the issue of voter transferability becomes essential in this election. And I think Sean will try to explain to you how Invoke does the maths on this. Voter transferability becomes a new factor. And this factor is extremely complicated, as you can imagine. Yeah. So it's not a straight, I got 40%, 45%, PAS got 20%. No, the equation doesn't work like that. What happens now is this. Voter transferability, to just give you a simple explanation. In 2013, when I stood for election in Kelana Jaya, yeah, I have a part called Subang Jaya. Hannah Yeoh, some of you may know, she's a very popular politician, very good politician. She got, 70,000 votes. I'm from PKR, she's from DAP. We're in the same coalition together. We campaign side by side. I gave a speech, she gives a speech. We go everywhere together. I didn't get 70,000 votes. I got like 58,000, So that means Hannah's votes are not 100% transferable to me. Yeah. So transferability is an equation that is complicated, but also tells you why the government is not certain of victory. When the government has good relations with PAS at the moment, UMNO and PAS are good friends, that voter transferability is a complicated manner. And at the divisional level, where real politics are, between the candidates, I don't see any chance of them working together. Yeah? So the three-corner fight in a complex environment where new parties have emerged, cancelling each other's position, the fight then doesn't become a Brexit or a Trump or Macron's fight. It's not a fight of populist numbers. It's a fight of door-to-door for every single parliamentary seat. And that is why it is completely unpredictable. Batu Pahat support level for Chinese and Pasir Mas support Chinese level or PJ support are completely different. You cannot group them all together and say, wow, this is the standard support level. Therefore, we're lucky. I mean, Invoke started about 8 months ago. I'm a founding member, but I'm non-executive. I don't deal with anything. Yeah, Rafizi Ramli does everything. Yeah, so it's lucky that we have managed to create a big data capability, and Sean will then present to you in the next few minutes on these issues. Yeah, but suffice to say, I'll just say now that we actually have a 50-50 chance of winning this election. Yeah. Now, if we have a 50-50 chance of winning this election, I'm going to go into part 3. I think I've spoken more than almost 30 minutes, right? Sorry. Not very good at timing. Very chong here, Chinese people say. Okay. So, since we have an even chance of winning, then the big question that most Singaporeans or most policymakers are worried about is, what will we do? As Selina introduced me earlier, I run the policy side. Yeah. So there are very, very specific policies that we need to carry out. The first and foremost important thing is within the first 6 months of this new administration, if Pakatan wins, yeah, is that we'll send in the lawyers first. The lawyers need to review every single agreement, every single legislation, and try to democratize Malaysia and bring back human rights. Yeah, this is not because we are pro-human rights or we are, loving democracy and stuff like that. Because we all know democracy and human rights is essential to grow the country. That is fundamentally economically sound to do. Better institutions produce better results. I mean, there are tons of books that talks about this. Yeah. So the key is, within the first 6 months, get all the lawyers in, propose the legislations, and push them through within 1 year. If you push through all these major democratic reforms, the key is this: it doesn't cost us a cent. When you push any legislation, there's always the issue about how much will this legislation cost. Democratic reforms cost nothing. So we would carry that out first as priority number one, because we have to sit down and look at the fiscal position, try to analyze properly with the complete data, which we don't have as opposition. Yeah, we've got snippets of it. So the first 6 months to a year is all about passing legislations which are pro-democracy. And I'm saying this not so much because simply because it makes a lot of economic sense. Yeah, we have 1.2 million Malaysians living overseas, and they are loaded, most of them. You know, they have a lot of money. If each of them send back 10,000 ringgit, yeah, that is a 12 billion injection into the system. I mean, 10,000 ringgit is a joke, lah. You know, most likely they'll send back 100,000 ringgit each. Yeah, 30,000 Sing. Send back to their cousins, ask them to start business. That's a 120 billion ringgit injection. That's what we call the democracy dividend that we can get from passing legislation that costs us not a single cent. That's priority number one. Priority number two is to look at the fiscal position. I think every new government should not pursue new taxes. Definitely not to do that in a rush. So the first year regarding fiscal numbers or revenue coming in is very simple. Maintain the system, get the proper analysis, get the experts in, the auditors, the accountants, to sort out and see what is the best revenue model for Malaysia. But for Petronas and the GLCs, cut all the protocol spending, all the ridiculous expenses they have, and that alone will be able to pump up quite a lot of returns back in terms of dividends for the government. I'm saying minimum 5 billion, if not 10 billion extra. Yeah, so that's the first one. As for the other revenue side, we will wait for a clear paper out and then slowly reverse and also move towards a progressive tax system. I think that's the key. And if we collect well, and if we have a good government, people will pay tax. Yeah, there is a direct correlation between trust in government and tax paying. If we run a clean government, people will pay tax. We should be able to collect another 20 billion. Easily, willingly paid by the people. Yeah, so I don't think the fiscal problem is too much, but we will need to revise everything within 3 years. Now, on the corporate side, you know, to me it's very clear lah. We need to do a structure of GLCs. We have to divest a chunk of GLCs. I'm even thinking about, you know, a 20% listing of Petronas, because you will inject basically transparency into Petronas accounts, at the same time raise about 100 billion for us. I want to divest as many GLCs as possible through the management buyout system. Most GLCs are run by civil servants and they are predominantly Malays. We need to create a strong Malay middle class, and the best way to do it is to do it through a management buyout system. If say a manager, if say a GLC makes 100 million a year, I tell the manager true potential to 200 to 300 million a year, you are entitled with your management team to buy it out. The key is when we sell these companies, we create a strong managerial ownership class in the Malay community, and at the same time return back a few 100 billion to us, which we need to take to pare down the national debt level to somewhere close to 40% of GDP. Yeah, we do this, the entire economic system, the market will be flooded with work, and we will finally realize true value and also bring down the national debt, which is strangling the country. If we do all this within 3 years, in the 4th year of administrating this country, with international labor rights through our human rights reforms, yeah, with the fact that we have cleaned up the tax system, with the fact that we're collecting more money, then we will pursue the one and the most important policy proposal, which is to increase wages for the poor. Increasing wages for the poor is core essential, because if the poor is given money, you will have greater equality. There will be less stress on the government spending to supply services. That means, you know, instead of waiting 8 hours to get to the Malaysian government hospital, they can choose to go to a private clinic because they have more money. Yeah. So sorting out the wages is essential to addressing the issue. And I'm going to wrap up now. If you pay people more, you actually generate more happiness. if you generate more happiness amongst people, there's more greater equality, the racial and religious issues will slowly taper down. I think, to be realistic, we can't see the end of racial or religious politics for some time. But if we rule for 2 terms, 10 years, and we grow Malaysian prosperity, and we share that prosperity, I think we will reach a point where we can once and for all bury the issue of race and politics from Malaysia. And that is why, in a nutshell, is the hope of Pakatan Harapan, appropriately, Harapan, yeah. And I think we need to get this message out, and we need to make sure that policymakers are pushing forward in this coming election the vision of what to do in Malaysia. So with that, thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry I've hit about 35 minutes, but it's essential to tell my constituents I'm not skiving here in Singapore. Thank you very much.